Episode 182, Ironman Louisville with Amy Coley. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Amy Coley about her recent race at Ironman Louisville. She is a first-time Ironman. This race took place on October 14th, 2018, where she had a time of 13 hours, 19 minutes, and 58 seconds. The weather was absolute garbage that day and raining all day, and the temperatures ranged from 48 to 61. The swim was shortened to 0.9 miles. Welcome to the show, Amy. I look forward to hearing about your race at Louisville.
I'm excited.
You should be. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I really thank you. It's going to be awesome. So what made you want to do this race?
I know a few years ago I said I would never do 140.6, that it just wasn't my thing. I'd never had the balls to do it, I guess. And last year I raced for SOAS Racing. On the ambassador team. And we had a group of girls who were going to do Louisville. And I was kind of contemplating Florida at the time when I finally got the guns to sign up for a 140.6. I'm like, I'm going to do Florida. And the girls were like, no, let's take a big group to Louisville. Let's do it. And at that time, I decided to move from Key West back home to Alabama. So I thought Louisville would be a better race platform because my training in Alabama would be more conducive to a course like Louisville than Florida. River swimming, hills to ride, the ability for flat running. You know, the terrain here is very similar to what it is in Louisville. So that was my first thought process on it. But the girls were the ones who really twisted my arm and said, let's go to Lou. And, you know, when the registration rolled out, we were like, all right, let's do it. And we all got in. So it was a lot of their peer pressure too that persuaded me to go to Louisville over Florida.
So what was it like signing up for your first full?
Well, I sat at my mom's kitchen table because I had just left my ex-husband and moved out. So I was sitting at her kitchen table with my laptop in my hand, and I was, about a week or 2 weeks out from my second 70.3 in Miami, which that's a different story. That's a hell of a race. But I was sitting at the table and like, you know what? It's time. I'm going to do it. And I signed up and then I did it. And I went, oh my God, I can't believe I just signed up for my first Ironman. Like what was I thinking? Why did I do that? Holy shit. Is this going to happen? Like all of these crazy things are running through my head. I couldn't believe I even hit the register button, to be honest with you.
Wow. So did you sleep much that night?
No, I didn't.
Wow. So this is like something that really scares you then.
It was. Yeah, it was terrifying. I had some really tough training going into my 70.3s. My 70.3s did not go well, neither of them. So it was very scary. I was really afraid of the training to come. I had a ton of friends who trained through the summer heat in Key West for Florida a couple of years ago. And I just saw how hard they had to work. And I'm like, man, do I really have the time commitment and all of this? But I decided since I was moving back home and it would be a good way for me to meet people and like-minded people. But yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. I thought I would never get through the day. A year ago, I thought it wasn't possible, but.
Wow. So going into Louisville this time, we're going to talk about the training for the 6 months prior. What was your training like on a week-to-week basis? What was the most hours you trained in 1 week?
For 6 months out? Is that what you said? 6 months out, I had got into some heavier stuff. I was doing 3-hour bike rides, consistently on the weekends. Hour, 45 minutes to an hour trainer rides during the week. Runs were, maximum of 8 to 10 miles, nothing insane that I hadn't done before. So that was about 6 months out. So I spent 6 months out. I did a lot of solid base building.
Okay. And leading up to the race, what was the most hours you trained 1 week?
I did 19 and a half hours one week. Yeah, it was tough, but I made it through that. And I when I got through that 20-hour week, I knew I was ready.
Wow. So with that week, what was your longest swim, bike, and runs?
That week I had a 4,000 swim. I think it was 4,000 yards. That was a 75-mile bike with either 4 or 5 mile run off the bike. And my long run was 15 miles. Wow.
Did you get injured at all in training?
Nope. I had a couple of weird little nagging pains along the way. I had this weird shoulder issue that if I turned my head to the left and I would ride an arrow for a long time, that it was like burning pain down my shoulder. I did go to the chiropractor, and I went every day for about two to 3 weeks and started getting some relief and finally got that worked out.
Wow. What was it?
I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. I'd gotten into a car accident in July with my bike. On the bike rack, I got rear-ended. So that was terrifying. I was afraid to get out. I was afraid to get out of the car. No, it was crazy. My wheels were bent. Brand new wheels were out of true. I needed new brakes because the brakes got all messed up, but the frame was totally fine. No other major damage.
Right.
So just minor stuff had to be replaced.
So did Orr comp you a set of wheels? What did that look like?
No, we were able to fix the wheels. So we did get, they were just knocked out of true. They were able to fix them. Jason from Orr offered to go through and inspect them for me, but there were no cracks or anything in them. So I had the bike shop fix them. Okay. So it was scary, but got through it.
Wow.
And I think that shoulder stemmed from that car accident.
So you didn't have any lingering pain from the car wreck?
No, other than that shoulder issue that popped up after that.
Wow. Man, that kind of sucks. I mean, I know I would be quite upset if somebody rear-ended me with my bike on the back.
I was freaking out. I was afraid to get out of the car because I didn't want to go see my bike just like in pieces. I was so afraid. I was so afraid that it was just going to be laying there mangled. And I was like, I can't get out of the car. It was crazy, but
that's one approach to have for that situation.
I was like, oh, is my bike okay? And then the guy that rear-ended, I got hit twice in that accident. Actually, one was a hit and run. This guy tried to go around me and hit my right driver's side, or the driver's side quarter panel in the rear. And then the truck right behind him wasn't paying attention. He straight rear-ended me. And the guy was like, I've never seen a bike like that. He was like, what do you do with that? I'm like, well, I'm training for an Ironman and I'm a triathlete. And he was like, oh, how much does a bike like that cost? I'm like, you don't want to know.
About as much as your car.
I'm like, probably as much as that piece of shit truck you're driving.
Yes. Wow.
Tell it like it is.
So whenever you actually think of your training, you weren't doing heart rate training. You don't have power. So what was your training like? Was it based off of RPE? What was it?
Yeah, it was a lot of perceived exertion and, a lot of, all right, well, I know what you're capable of. So we're going to give you some time goals and speed goals to work with, for training. I did end up getting the Garmin 935 that has a heart rate monitor built into the wrist, which isn't as accurate as a strap, and I got that towards the end. So towards the end, we were able to use some heart rate data, which was beneficial for like interval training. You could really see where the intervals were and things in the heart rate, but did a lot of perceived exertion training.
Okay. So whenever you actually think of booking your travel to the race, you can easily drive up there, but you're going to need a hotel. You're going to need some kind of accommodation there. When did you book this?
I booked 3 hotel rooms at 3 different hotels because I didn't know where I wanted to stay. And I was able to cancel them through September with no charges or anything. So I just booked them in advance. And once I made a decision, I ended up picking the Galt House, which I think was a fantastic idea. It was centrally located to transition, the finish line. It was a really nice place to stay. And it was actually cheaper than any of the other places I had booked, which was surprising.
How much was that a night?
I think I ended up paying $185 a night.
Wow, that's not bad.
That was with tax and everything.
Wow. So going into this race, did you have a full-time job as well?
I do. I work full-time for First State Bank in Key West, Florida. When I moved, they allowed me to keep my job, so I work from home. But I do work 40 hours a week.
Wow. So how do you balance life, work, and training?
I got up at 4 and 4:30 every morning, got my first workout in of the day at 4 o'clock. When I got off work, I went and did the second one. It was a lot, but I had to do what I had to do to get that work done.
So what about your day-to-day nutrition? Did you struggle with that along the way?
There were some times where I'm like, where I thought I really needed to get my nutrition in check because I was just eating everything. When the training load picked up, I went through a couple of weeks of just starving. Like I was hungry all the time, and it finally settled in deeper into the training. My body finally got into a rhythm. I did try really hard to eat clean.
What do you think of clean being?
As less processed as possible. I don't eat pasta. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I don't eat pasta. I try to avoid things like that. So I kept with, your sweet potatoes, brown rice, and avoided processed food as much as possible. Okay. Except for I'm kind of a sucker for a double stuffed Oreo.
Wow. So knowing that you're diabetic and knowing that you're doing the Ironman training and even the Ironman for somewhat of your health, was it frustrating for you not to be losing weight during your training?
Yes. I did gain weight initially. And that was just because the training picked up and I couldn't compensate for it. And I was eating too much. Eventually, as training progressed further, I did start dropping weight. One thing I did notice, though, my weight loss wasn't significant, but I went down a full size in clothes. So there was a total body change from the start of Ironman training to race day.
Wow.
I mean, complete change. I went from, my arms are now muscular. I had muscles in places I never thought I would. I started, getting lines in my abs, which I thought was crazy. But things changed. The weight didn't change as much, but the muscle put on definitely made it different.
Your body composition changed.
Yes, completely.
Wow. So as far as balancing life, work, and training, you got up early, you did workouts after work, and that's how you balanced everything. You don't have a significant other right now, I'm assuming, so there's no real issue there.
Right.
Okay. So transition a little bit more to this race. What did your taper look like?
Taper, I loved taper. So most people don't. But I was so exhausted by the time taper rolled around that I enjoyed it. So the first week, I did 2 full weeks of taper. The first week really cut everything back by about half and just maintained some intensity, maintained some bike intervals. The week going into the race was definitely, I did 1 workout a day, which was so confusing to me. I didn't have to get up early. I got to sleep in a little. It was nice being able to have conversations without being so exhausted. And I finally felt the freshness of the legs kicked in. So yeah, the second week of taper was a change. The workouts weren't as long, which was the biggest thing for me. Those 2 and 3 hour rides went to an hour, 45 minutes. Runs went from 8 miles to 5, and it really was nice to cut back.
Wow. So when did you start looking at the weather?
About 2 weeks out.
As soon as you could?
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things. I started looking at it because I get 2 weeks out on the weather app that I use on my phone. And I just started looking at it knowing it would change. That I've raced a lot and weather changes quickly. That's just how it goes. You just never know. And a good friend of mine is a meteorologist, so she's taught me to not look at the weather until the day before. So it's one of those things. I looked at it 2 weeks out and it looked great. It was like high of 65 and sunny. I'm like, oh, we couldn't ask for better conditions. And then all of a sudden, about a week out, it all started to change. And it was 65 and cloudy. And then it went to 60 cloudy with a slight chance of rain. And then about 4 days out, it was high of 55, cloudy, 60% chance of rain all day. And I'm like, great, this is going to suck. But I'm also used to warm weather riding. So I wasn't fully prepared. I didn't have gloves. I didn't have like shoe covers for my bike shoes. So I did have to go on a hunt. Danny Freeman from Base Performance, though, let me use his gloves on the bike. So he gets a big shout out on that one. But yeah, I kind of had it. I went into panic mode because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But at the end of the day, it was one of those things you couldn't stress over changing the weather. So I refused to let the weather to add any stress to my day.
Well, that's good. So whenever you actually started driving up to Louisville, what was your drive up like?
I ended up driving up Thursday afternoon and stayed in a house with a couple of my SOAS teammates. The drive up was great until I got into Tennessee, and then Nashville traffic is just terrible at 4:00. Don't ever recommend driving through there at that time.
I've done it.
So it's terrible. It sucks. But so I got through there. Once I got into Kentucky, I mean, it was smooth sailing into Louisville. So the drive was pretty easy,
nice.
despite that little bit in Nashville.
So did you go straight to the expo or Ironman Village in this case, or did you go to the hotel
no,
first?
Because it was later, I left here at like 2:00. So it was 8:00 before I got to Louisville. So I met up with the girls, literally took my bike off the bike rack, put it in the house, and we went and ate barbecue in downtown Louisville.
The house?
So I stayed in a house with some of my SOAS teammates Thursday night in Louisville.
Oh, okay. So so you got there on Thursday. Whenever you actually went out to eat, what was your first impression of Louisville?
Well, I had been to Louisville before. So, but I love downtown Louisville. It's a fun place. It's historic. I love all of the distilleries and stuff. So that's a fun part of it for me.
Nice.
But yeah.
So that's Thursday. Now on Friday, you go to the Ironman Village for your first Ironman. What was your impression of the Ironman Village?
Well, I remember I checked in early Friday to the hotel, and we had gone for a ride that morning. So we got a little bit of a feel for the cold weather riding. But I walked up to the village before I even walked in, and you can see the Ironman flags and the signs and the tents. And I actually stood there, and I think tears welled up in my eyes a little bit because I'm like, oh my God, I'm walking in to check in for my very first Ironman. I'm going to be an Ironman in a couple of days. And it was pretty overwhelming, to be honest with you. But I walked in. I have been to bigger Ironman expos. This one was a little on the slim side, but it didn't matter. It was still great. It was my first Ironman, so I was excited for everything.
Wow. So how was the athlete check-in?
It was a breeze, actually. I walked in. I stopped over at the Base Performance tent and checked in with the guys there working because I ended up working for a little bit. I do race for them too. I stopped in, said hello, and went over to athlete check-in and ran into my friend Natalie that races for Base. And the two of us checked in together. So I'm sorry, the cat just got in my lap. What are you doing? So I got to check in, and Natalie and I are the only two in line at the table. There was no line when we went in. So she walked through the whole process with me. This was not her first race. So she went through everything with me, waited on me. It was just really exciting. And I looked up, and Brett is standing there to take a picture. He's like, hey, we got to take a picture of your first check-in. So I loved it. It was great. It was pretty smooth through check-in. I've been through some check-ins that took forever, but because there was no line, I just went right through it and got right out. Wow.
So after you get done checking in, all that fun stuff, this is Friday. Are you doing a workout on Friday other than the bike ride?
Friday, I did a workout Friday morning. I did a 30-minute ride. We went out to 1694, which used to be the out and back section of the Louisville course. We went out just to ride out there because there was no traffic, and it was a lot easier than trying to ride somewhere downtown. And River Road definitely isn't a good idea, not on race day.
Right.
So We went out there, rode for 30 minutes, and my friend Dale that I had stayed with on Thursday, she rode with me, and then we went and did a 15-minute run off the bike together. So just super easy, nothing hard. Just went out there, just spin the legs up and try to stay fresh.
Wow.
And then Saturday I did the practice swim, but nothing else on Friday.
So how are you feeling overall at this point? Did you have any pain, soreness, blisters, anything like that?
No, nothing. Everything felt good. Everything was ready to go.
Wow. That's great. So the day before the race, you get to check in your bike. You get to kind of get off your feet a little bit, hopefully, maybe take a nap, sleep in a little bit. What was this day like?
So Saturday, I got up and went to the practice swim. It was so cold. It was 41 degrees. I met with a friend of mine in the hotel lobby, and we walked down to the practice swim together. And it was 41 degrees, and it wasn't raining much, but it was cloudy, and it was just a little bit
like a mist.
It was awful. It was so cold, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible. But got to the practice swim and put that wetsuit on and got in the water. And I was like, wow, 68-degree water feels like bath water, which no, you never think you're going to say that ever. But that practice swim was crazy. It took me 17 minutes to swim 400 yards. I was just mind blown. And I was like, this sucks. And so I stopped there at the buoy for a second at the 400 yard point and get ready to turn around. Before I knew it, I had already drifted a couple hundred yards in the blink of an eye. So I started my watch and I swam back to the exit for the practice swim. And I was at a total time of 19 and a half minutes. That's how crazy that current was Saturday. So I swam back in 2 minutes. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So it was insane.
What else did you do that day? You check your bike in? What was that process like?
Well, my dad got there around noon.
Oh, wow, your dad came.
My dad flew in from Miami Beach. And
wow, that's awesome.
So I waited. I knew I was going to wait on him. I had asked him the day before if he wanted to go to check in with me. So he did. So I waited on him to get there, and we walked down to check in, and I racked my bike, dropped off my gear bags, and then he and I went to lunch.
Where'd y'all go to lunch at?
I don't remember. It was some sandwich place on 4th Street Live. Couldn't tell you the name.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Because I went, sorry, excuse me. I went to Wild Eggs, which is a little breakfast place right there.
Oh, I've been to Wild Eggs. It's amazing.
Yes.
I went 6 weeks before the race over Labor Day weekend. The SOAS girls and we have a teammate that lives in Louisville, and she hosted us at her house, and we did a course preview. And we got our long run on Sunday, and we went to Wild Eggs for brunch, and it was amazing.
Yes.
So good. I was really bummed I didn't go during race weekend.
Yes, it was great. The girl I was with, Joanna, she'll be on the show a little bit later today, actually. And she got the hash brown potato head or something like that.
Yeah.
It was really good, apparently. I ate
everything on my plate. Yeah, it was so good. We got their grits of the day, and I don't think there was a grit left in anybody's bowl.
Awesome. So your dad came in. Did your mom come in as well? My
mom did too. My mom lives in Georgia, so she drove up. She got there Saturday afternoon, so I didn't see her until about my dad and I went to dinner at 5, so I didn't see her till we got back around 7. But I had to send her to the grocery store because I forgot Uncrustables. You should never forget those. And everything kind of ran together Saturday. And I just texted her. I'm like, is there any way you can go to the store for me? Because I didn't have time. I just ran out of time with everything going on. So, which of course she totally did for me. But yeah, so she came in at 7, and we had a little family meeting Saturday night. Because I told the family, I'm like, there's a few things I'm going to need post race. And I want you guys to kind of have some say in what happens. And that way it runs as smoothly as possible. Because I wasn't sure what kind of mental state I was going to be in. So I needed to know that somebody could get my gear for me and that somebody could get me back to the hotel room. Like, those are my main needs. Who wants to take which job? So we had my aunt and uncle came up too. So we had a little chit chat, little family powwow at the fireplace at the Galt House to determine who was going to take what responsibility Sunday night.
Wow. Did everybody stay at the Galt House?
We all did, yes.
Nice. So with everybody coming in, did you have certain way that you wanted to have someone pick up your bike, your bags, so that way you didn't have to worry about it afterwards?
Yeah, my mom took that job. She has done that numerous times for me with my 270.3s. She did that for me, so she kind of knew what to expect. And my great aunt that came up as a nurse, so we kind of made sure my dad and my aunt's job was to get me back to the room in case I needed any kind of medical attention. They would know a lot of what I would need. So I was just really prepared for everything. Being diabetic, you have to be prepared for any small thing to go wrong. It can blow up very quickly. So having the nurse on my team definitely made me feel a little bit more confident about the whole thing.
Good. Now, we haven't really mentioned what you're using for nutrition yet, because I wanted to save that till we had a little bit more time. I think now is a good time to actually mention that, because being diabetic, you can't really have as much sugar in your calories, or can you?
You can. You just have to be careful with it. You have to know what you're putting in your body. And for me, nutrition was a lot of trial and error. I struggled with nutrition since I've been doing triathlon. But I really finally got it nailed down this year. I use Base Hydro for my hydration. Obviously I use their salt too, but crazy enough, you're not supposed to try anything new on race day. But, Sunday, I hadn't used a goo in a few years. And for whatever reason, this past training cycle, I really just needed an easy way to get some calories in. So I went back to using goo. They used to hurt my stomach. And one thing I noticed as I've gotten stronger as a triathlete and my needs, your needs change as an athlete. And as you grow in race distance and training numbers and training hours, I was able to tolerate solid foods on the bike. So I'm like, well, let me try some goo just in between. So I do goo too. So on Sunday, I probably had like 8 or 9 of them throughout the whole day, which is insane. But, yeah, I use goo. I take an Uncrustable. I'll use that like halfway through just for something solid with a little extra calories. My favorite thing that I have used this year was a Payday bar. Love those. They're amazing. I had one in my special needs bag and I ate like half of it. But yeah, I mean, you're putting out the effort. So with diabetes, as long as you're burning, a lot of that sugar gets burned too. And you have to be careful, because when I did my course preview 6 weeks before, my sugar had gone up. I have a glucose monitor that reads every 5 minutes. So I have I know constantly where my sugar is at. I had gotten to the course preview, and at one of our little SAG stops that a friend of ours did for us, I had grabbed an Uncrustable and I noticed my sugar was on the high side. So I took in some insulin, which was less than what I would normally take in because I knew I was working hard and we still had a few hours to go. About an hour after I took that insulin with the Uncrustable that I ate, I bottomed out and had to stop for about 15 minutes. And sugar dropped.
When you say bottomed out,
like my sugar dropped.
I don't know what this feels like. I don't know what this experience is like. Tell me what that is like.
That is a very hard experience to explain. Your brain's really foggy. You have a really hard time concentrating. You can get shaky. It's really hard to pick up on when you're riding in the heat, because your heart rate changes. It goes up significantly, but the pattern in which your heart is beating changes, which is really odd. And you kind of just feel really weak. So it's really hard to differentiate the low blood sugar and I'm just working really hard and it's really hot. The biggest thing for me when I know my blood sugar is dropping is I start to sweat, and it usually it's the craziest thing. It starts on my back. My back will start to sweat, and that generally signals to me that my blood sugar is low. So we had gotten to a stop sign on this ride and I'm like, all right, let me check where it's at. And it had dropped significantly. And a goo in about 15 minutes later, and it had come back up. But it's really hard to explain. You ever see those thought bubbles on like cartoon characters?
Yeah.
And you can see like pictures of what they're thinking. And if you've ever seen one that's just like a whole scrambled mess, like that's kind of what my brain feels like.
Wow.
Like a whole bunch of tumbleweeds rolling around in there.
Well, that makes sense with what you're trying to explain there. So on your glucose monitor that you have, How does this actually, what does this look like? Is this like attached to you somehow? What is this?
I do have a glucose monitor attached to me. I usually have, it's on my hip. I put it on my hip. I put it on my arm. So it stays on for a week at a time, and then you change them out. But I have a little receiver when I don't have my phone with me. It reads to my phone, and it reads to this little receiver that looks kind of like one of the original iPod Nano. That's kind of what this receiver looks like. So it's tiny. I can take it anywhere. It fits right in my bento box on my bike, or I keep it in my pocket. And it reads every 5 minutes. It alerts to all sorts of numbers. It'll alert to rising too quickly. It'll alert at a certain number that it's too high. It'll also alert to your sugars dropping too quickly, and will send out alerts. If I have my phone, it'll send out alerts to people that I have set up in here that my sugar's too low.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty cool technology.
What is your range of low and high that you like to keep it at?
Working out, as long as I don't fall below, I like working out. I like to stay between 150 and 200. It's just a safe number. Doctors may not agree with that 200, but being an athlete, being an endurance athlete, and knowing that things can drop quickly, I like to stay in the 150 to 200 range. I've definitely worked out with those higher numbers, but it works out to not have your sugar bottom out. High blood sugar doesn't hurt you.
Right. Now, what about on a normal day that you're not working out?
On a normal day, I like to keep my blood sugar between 1 and 150.
Okay. So just a little bit lower than that.
Yeah. I mean, normal blood sugar for a person without diabetes is 70 to 100. Below, a diabetic doesn't like to stay below 100 because things can change quickly. So
a normal person is 75 to 100.
Yes. 70 to 100 roughly.
Okay. And that's because their body is able to metabolize it quickly and all that.
Yeah. Your body produces the insulin that you need.
Wow. So when did you actually find out that you had diabetes, and what was that like?
It was Valentine's Day, 2014. I was 22.
Wow. That had to be like hard for you to go through.
It was difficult. I went through something I don't talk about a whole lot, but I will talk about it now. I went through a very severe depression when I found out I had diabetes, because it was life-changing. Everything I knew about the way I did life changed dramatically. So it was very difficult to adjust initially.
How long do you feel like you were depressed looking back on it?
It was a while. I mean, it was probably 6 to 8 months of just trying to figure out why I felt this way, and why I had to live life this way. And it was a good 6 to 8 months. And then once my body regulated and all of my lab work was finally normal, I started to just feel better in general. And once I started feeling better all over, that mental fog and really dark place went away.
Wow. And you were married at the time?
I was, yes.
Wow. Was that a good thing to have a spouse at the time to help you through this?
He wasn't. It was hard. It was hard for him too. He didn't understand. And we were actually kind of going through a rough time on top of it. But looking back at the struggles that we went through, a lot of them were related to the fact that I was an undiagnosed diabetic. And I was in a really bad mental state for a very long time, even before. It's something that we've since talked about. And after our divorce and everything, we talked about it. Because I've been married twice. This was the first husband. We got divorced not long after that, but it was something that we talked about after, and we're finally on good terms with. And he understands more now that I needed more than I got at the time, and he just didn't understand either. So it wasn't a great time for either of us.
Wow. Like, I just can't imagine being 22 and being diagnosed with diabetes. I mean, it's not like you're obese by any means. And
nope. And actually I had lost. So rewind to like 2012, I was close to 200 pounds.
Oh.
And I had noticed in 2012, I had started dropping weight rapidly. And in 2013, I had gotten down to about 135 pounds.
Wow, almost a 70-pound weight loss.
Yes. And the date of my diagnosis, I was 127 pounds. So, yeah, I mean, the weight loss was significant. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune, so it's not related to lifestyle choices and being overweight. But I dropped all that weight significantly because my blood sugar was so high that my body was trying to get rid of it. So it was getting rid of fat too. So I went through all of that. Now that my body is regulated, it's a little bit more difficult to keep weight off. And I gained about 25 pounds back, wow. Which is probably not a bad thing.
Right. Wow. So the whole nutrition side of things, the whole blood sugar monitoring during an event like this makes your day from a logistics standpoint a little bit more difficult.
Yes, it does.
Because now you have to think about having this monitor with you throughout the day, making sure that you're not losing it. Number one, priority number one, don't lose it. Number two, make sure it's charged if it does require a charge. And then you have to make sure that it's reading accurately throughout the day. And if it's not waterproof, you need to have a Ziploc baggie for it, so on and so forth. Like, there's so many other things that you have to think about just to make sure that you're not going too high, too low with the actual readings of the monitor, but then the monitor itself. And then
make sure you have insulin in case you are too high. And, so that's syringes and needles and everything you can imagine. I carried in my back pocket of my bike jersey in a Ziploc bag. It was all there together.
Man, okay. So the day before the race, you have to lay out all your gear for the bike and the run bags that you're going to be dropping off.
Yeah.
What were you putting in each bag?
Fortunately, I was really smart, and before I left, I had everything packed into individual bags so that I could literally just take it out of the bag and put it into the transition bag. Obviously, bike bag was your standard helmet, shoes. I was able to get gloves, so I had gloves in there. I did pack an extra jacket, which I put on a long sleeve zip up jacket just for some extra warmth. Initially, I wasn't going to do that. I was afraid it'd get warm, but I never did. So I was really happy to have the long sleeve in the bag. So that was the bike bag. The run bag, I packed an extra set of gloves that would be dry in case I was cold and wanted them. I did do a full change of clothes between the swim and the bike and the run. Normally, I wouldn't do that, but being wet and cold, it was a really good idea, and it paid off in the end to be dry. So the run bag had just your standard run belt, hat, but I did throw in gloves. I put a headband in there in case I wanted to wear a headband instead of a hat to keep my ears warm. Ended up going with the hat. It was just easier.
Wow. So whenever you actually think of preparing for the weather, what changes did you make to actually prepare for this weather?
The big change I made was to change clothes. Initially, I was just going to wear my tri-kit and go swim to bike to run and call it a day. But once the weather shifted and it was going to be cool and rainy, I decided to be as dry and warm as possible. That would play into my favor. And I'm really glad I made that change.
Good. So after you check everything in the day before the race, you get everything offloaded at transition literally, and then you don't have your bike, everything's checked in. What do you do next?
Actually, on Saturday, my family had all gotten there. My dad was there, my aunt and uncle were there, and they were catching up. They hadn't seen each other in a while. And while they were catching up, I said, look, I need to go rest. So about 3:00, I went to my room and put my Normatec boots on.
Oh, you have a set of Normatecs.
I do. I got a set of Normatecs. I've had them. They're like the best thing ever. So I laid in my Normatecs for about an hour, watched Hocus Pocus on TV, because for whatever reason, I couldn't get the Kona coverage to come through. So I ended up watching silly Halloween movies, but it was a good way to not think about everything for a bit.
Oh, good. So for dinner, what did you have for dinner?
We went to a place called Valere. It was Italian, but I ended up having chicken marsala, which is one of my favorites, and potatoes.
Okay. So nothing extravagant, just something normal.
Nope. Super simple.
Okay. And then you go back to your hotel room by 6. You're in bed by 7:30. You wake up about 5:30.
I was probably not in bed till 10. I met with the family, kind of got the game plan squared away for what everybody was going to do on Sunday. And then, of course, I still had final things to do, like make sure everything was ready, make sure I was ready. And it was probably 9 o'clock by the time I had settled down, but it was a good 10 o'clock before I went to bed.
Wow. And then your alarm clock was set for what?
I got up at 4.
Wow.
I was up at 4. I actually slept. I couldn't believe it. So I did sleep.
So what did you do in the morning before you actually left the hotel?
I got up, I ate breakfast. The first thing I did was make my staple breakfast for race day and long workouts of oatmeal and peanut butter. Okay. That's my go-to. So I got up, I got dressed. I met my dad in the hotel lobby at 5. And we stood there for a minute, realized it was pouring down rain. So we ended up getting some trash bags from the front desk. And so some lady actually got a whole roll from someone.
Oh, God.
So everybody was wearing the hotel trash bags down to transition, which actually I'm really glad I had it because it just kept that cold rain off.
Wow. And that's about a half-mile walk-ish.
It was about a half mile to transition and then probably close to a mile from transition to the swim start.
Right. And there's no shuttles there either.
Right. We walked.
In the rain.
In the rain, which was okay with me because it kind of kept some nervous energy out.
Well, that's good. So whenever you get to transition, what are you doing in transition?
I went into transition, put my bike computer on my bike, put my bottles on my bike, checked my tires one last time. So got my bike squared away. And then I went and I had to put a few things in my bike gear bag, like my glucose monitor. And then any of the food that I wanted to have on the bike that day. I did throw an extra long sleeve in my run bag, I think. So there were a couple of things that I kind of forgot to put in there that I did end up was able to put in transition that morning, which saved me in the long run. So I got my stuff set up pretty quickly, actually, because I wasn't super stressed about it. Just made sure I knew where my rack was and to get on my bike later and went on to the swim start. Okay.
So you walked down to the swim start with the masses of migrating people down there. Yep. What was it like when you got down there?
Well, I actually had gotten down there early. I made a point to get transition set up early. I'm just kind of an early person. I'm never late. I'm always on time. So I got to swim start early before people really started lining up in the lines to self-seed for the swim. We found a place under the walking bridge because that's kind of where it was. And we found a place where we were out of the rain and just kind of hung out for a little bit. Got my wetsuit on, and as it got closer to time, I went and got in the line.
Wow! So where did you seed yourself initially?
In the 110 to 120.
Well, you swam a little bit faster than that, I see.
Yeah, I did. Crazy enough. So I seeded myself in the hour 10 to hour 20 because when I did my 4,200 yards in the pool, I did it right at an hour and 20 minutes. So I thought the 110 to 120 was a safe bet. I was standing there. There was a helicopter flying over, but I was standing in the line. Brett had come over. He was talking to me for a minute and he went back to get his wetsuit on. And I look up and some of my base teammates were there. So a couple of the guys showed up. Craig showed up. And so we ended up just staying in the line together, which paid off for me. They kept me laughing. Yes. They kept me giggling because I was terrified that morning. I wasn't panicking, but the nerves were starting to kick and just any standard pre-race nerves. And I was really glad the guys showed up to go to the swim start with me because they kept me from really freaking out. But I was standing there and I hadn't heard the announcement at this time when they walked up. And Les says to me, he's like, "Hey, did you hear the announcement?" I'm like, "No, there's been a helicopter flying over." He was like, "They cut the swim." So what do you mean? He goes, they shortened the swim. We don't have to swim up and around the island anymore. And I questioned him like 3 times. I'm like, are you fucking with me? Are you pulling my leg? And he was like, no, I heard it when I walked over. So I was actually, you would think that as a first time Ironman, I'd be really disappointed that they shortened the swim. I was not, because I knew how hard that current was flowing. So I was very relieved that we didn't have to swim up current around the island. Wow. It was huge.
So whenever you actually got to the water and you realized it's only a 0.9 mile swim, what was this process like for you? Because I was down in transition, working transition at about 7:25 whenever I had to go through transition, and I got word. I had to go through telling all the volunteers, hey, look, we need to anticipate a big congestion here of people, because whenever you take normally from a 55-minute swim all the way to a 2-hour and 20-minute swim, and you condense that down to less than a 30-minute period of 2,500 people.
Yeah.
The tents can only hold so many people.
Right. It's
cold. There's heaters in the tents, and everybody's going to want to be in there. So we need to anticipate a large congestion, and we need to be able to help people get in and out very quick and get out on the road as fast as possible. And they didn't realize that a shortened swim with the strong current was going to yield this congestion. And I was like, I hope the race director, now I know his name, Eric, I hope he knows to only allow so many people start and then hold it for a few minutes on the swim start. And thankfully, he knew to do that, because
we started one at a time.
Yeah, if he wouldn't have done that, that would have made transition a nightmare. But thankfully, he knew to do that on the fly. Like, that was a good call on his move.
Right.
So you get in the swim. What was the swim like? Because it was delayed by 30 minutes for them to move the buoys, get everything set up, and then you actually got to get into the water a little bit later after 8.
I didn't get in the water till 9. The pros started around 8. I remember standing in line in that grass field when the cannon went off. Walking down, getting towards the docks. We look up, and the first pros are already coming by, and we're like, holy shit, how fast was their swim? Because it was 8:30. And when these guys are coming by, so we didn't end up, because I was in line with Les and Craig, and we got in the water right at 9, the 3 of us. They actually let us in the water at the same time, which was kind of fun. But got in that water, and you couldn't even get your face in the water before that current was already kicking you down.
Wow.
It was crazy. I mean, I swam a 17-minute swim for almost a mile. I mean, it's insanely fast. I really at one point had to focus on just staying on the course. Because of the temperature difference between the water and the air, my goggles had fogged up, and they were tinted. So we had no sun, and I couldn't see anything. And it was just a fight to get to the next buoy in the right direction. You had to turn into shore a couple of 100 yards before you actually got there, or you would have just floated right past the swim exit.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was kind of nerve wracking, to be honest with you, because I wasn't sure where to go. It was a mess, but there were the volunteers. Like, I got sucked into a swim buoy at one point, and I ended up just hitting it out of the way because I couldn't get around it. The current was it was crazy.
Wow. So whenever you actually got to the swim exit, there's stairs there. You run up the ramp, and there's wetsuit strippers right there. Then you run up and around to get your bags, and then into the tent. Mm-hmm. What was T1 like for you? You were in there just under 13 minutes.
T1, when I got in there, I really expected it to be a lot more hectic. The only thing is the women's change tent was like on top of a sand pit. Really? So we had this black sand in there. And so, of course, you walk through that barefoot. And if anybody who knows me well knows that I can't stand for my feet to be dirty. So you had to walk through this black sand while you're wet, which is terrible, and go through that. Now, fortunately, I was able to get a volunteer for T1, so she helped me get my change clothes and put on a dry outfit. She actually took water and rinsed off my feet for me. and dried them off before I put my shoes on, which was fantastic because I did not want to have shoes full of dirt to start my day. Wow. But yeah, I mean, that sand was terrible. And I heard that from so many people I heard from the people that the guys didn't have that issue.
It was just mud.
Yeah, it was sand, and sand sticks to everything. But it was really nice and warm in there, which was so fantastic because walked into that tent and I'm like, thank God, because that water was cold. It was a cold morning.
Wow. So after you get out to your bike, you realize, okay, it's still raining. And now then you have to get your bike. And then it seems like it's a really long walk with the bike from even the time you get on the little road or sidewalk there. You have to go all the way to the road. There's a little step right there where there's a curb. And then you have to go around and then to the mountain line. This is pretty long.
It seemed like a quarter of a mile or so. It was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and then, well, thankfully that's aligned with spectators and Sherpas and all that fun stuff.
Yes, it was. I did get to see my family going down that direction. I got to see a lot of friends who were there as a Sherpas and friends and taking pictures. So it was exciting to get out of the water and to be getting onto the bike. But I swear I thought I was never going to get to the mountain line to get on my bike.
Well, so whenever you actually get to mount your bike, get on the bike course, how does the first few miles of the bike go for you?
Well, fortunately, they're flat on that course, but it was raining pretty hard by the time I got on the bike. So it was more of a just, all right, calm down, settle in. It's going to be a long day. It's going to be a cold day, but when you just had to settle in. And I was cold, not going to lie. That was the coldest part of the day for me, were the first probably 25 miles on the bike.
Wow. So what was your mindset for this day? Did you just want to finish? Did you have time goals? Did you want to have a certain power, or well, you don't have a power meter or a heart rate monitor that you're using really? So how did you want to tackle this day from a strategic standpoint?
From a strategic standpoint, I know one thing about me. Anytime I start putting pressure on numbers and pressure to do great things, that my race falls apart. The wheels always come off because I focus on the numbers and not how I'm feeling, not what the day is presenting. So I made a goal from the very first day I started training for this race that all I wanted to do is finish. And Dave and I spent a lot of time talking going into race day about we want to finish in one piece, healthy and uninjured. And that was my goal. I wanted to smile. I wanted to enjoy the day, especially since it was my first Ironman. I learned just from experience that when you race a new distance that you've never raced before, you don't know how your body's going to react to it. You don't know how you're going to react to the conditions given. So I did have time goals. I had a few, and I actually was pretty close. I met him on the run, and the bike was just a little bit off, but that was just given the day. So I was just really happy with my race in general. So going into it with that mindset was crucial for me.
Good. Now, whenever you think of your nutrition plan for this bike ride, how did you want to get calories in on a consistent basis? Or did you have another plan because it was colder than what it should have been and you had to alter that? What was this like?
Well, my initial plan was I was going to get a bottle of fluid an hour, get water when I needed it on the course, take in my standard, if I wanted a goo or if I wanted an Uncrustable, I would get whatever I wanted at the time that I timed it all out. My watch would beep every so often for me to eat or to drink and whatnot. It was very difficult. My hands were really cold, even with the gloves. It was really hard to get those goo packs open, given the wet roads and the conditions. It was very, very difficult to get those bottles off my bottle holders to refill my Aero bottle.
Really?
Yeah, it was just hard, especially when you get into a pack and you're climbing up hills. It was just really difficult. So I had to be very careful when I did that. Wow.
So what about the quality of the road here? So this is a lollipop, obviously, if you're familiar with that term. You have a stick and then you have the lollipop itself. What was the stick of this bike ride like for you?
That was probably headed out was probably the worst part of the ride for me. I had gotten into this really dark place because I was freezing. Mentally, I wasn't okay. Physically, I was there. but I was cold, and I was focusing on the cold and focusing on how miserable it was. And I finally decided, you know, I was just trying to do everything I could to move forward, and my legs were cold, which hurt. And that was probably my least favorite part, was the first part headed out until you make the turn for the circle.
So what was going on in your mind with this dark place? Were you upset? Were you mad? Were you?
No, I was afraid that at the rate I was going, I wouldn't make the bike cut off. And I know that's a little bit irrational, because I was moving ahead of the pace to make the bike cut off, but I was afraid that it was just going to slow down from there, because I knew I'd ridden the course before, so I knew what was coming. It was just a lot of, yeah, I had never thought I would quit. Not one time during the whole day did I want to quit. I just thought for a minute that I wasn't going to make it.
Wow.
That I wasn't going to get there, that they were going to have to pull me off my bike or something. So that whole section through there was pretty tough. Finally made that turn.
How did you get to a positive mindset there?
I didn't get to the positive mindset until about mile 25. That's where you make the turn.
Almost the first 2 hours were bad then.
Yeah, the first 2 hours were really tough.
Wow. I mean, normally that's towards the later portion of the rides for most people, but
yes,
you're having to deal with that right up front.
I was dealing with that right up front. I was able to shake that mindset at mile 25, which was also the mile 60 special needs stop.
Right.
And that was obviously on the lollipop part already.
Yep.
But I said, you know what? I got off my bike. I said, I need to get off my bike for a second. So I stopped at the bathroom. I refilled my Aero bottle. I ate an Uncrustable. And I just took a minute to recompose myself, which was crucial for the rest of my day, because I got off the bike. I warmed up for a split second, got back on my bike, and kept going. And I realized at mile 30, the rain had quit. And it quit for about 2 hours. So we had 2 hours where it didn't rain. I was able to warm up enough that I wasn't freezing. So my clothes had dried out a little bit. And then somewhere around mile 50, I found my legs again and was able to start riding. And I knew special needs was coming. So I knew at mile 60 that I would get that moment to regroup again and be able to get back on my bike.
Okay. So during that first 25 miles, did you get emotional at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Now, with the aid stations on this bike ride, did you have enough time to get what you needed? Being that your hands are wet, the bottles are wet, everything is wet, you had a hard time getting the bottles, I'm assuming?
I was fortunately self-sufficient enough that I didn't take any bottles off the course.
Wow.
So I had everything kind of set up the way I needed it, which worked out. So I didn't end up taking any bottles or food off the course.
That's crazy for 112 miles, self-sufficient.
Yep.
Wow. So were you trying to hit a certain cadence going up the hills or anything like that?
Some of the hills, I just had to spin up the hills and just take it easy, because I knew that it was a long day. I know that second loop on the course will eat you alive if you take the first loop too hard. So I just made an effort to go easy up, and I learned the hard way that you need to ride the hills down, and that way you maintain your momentum as long as possible. So I made sure to do that throughout the whole day.
Good. As far as seeing flats, mechanicals, or wrecks on the bike, did you see any of that?
I saw a lot of flats and a lot of mechanicals. I didn't personally witness any wrecks. I did see some people on the run who had wrecked. They were kind of beat up. Some friends of mine said they saw some pretty ugly wrecks for kind of silly things that happened.
Silly things?
Well, like one story I heard was a girl had put Velcro on her Aero bottle. I don't know why or for what reason, but so she had Velcro on her Aero bottle and she had Velcro on her gloves. Well, she had gone to do something with her Aero bottle and her Velcro got stuck from her glove. It got stuck to her Aero bottle and she couldn't get detached from it, and she missed a turn and wiped out.
Ouch.
So that I did hear. That was, probably one of the craziest stories that I've heard.
Wow. So just to kind of put another thing in perspective here. I know that this race had a high number of DNFs. Even pros here DNF'd. Some that I've actually interviewed. And they were actually, before you even got to mile 25, you had already passed people on the side of the road that had DNF'd.
Yes, I had.
So,
I saw people standing there.
What was this like for you mentally to see fast athletes that were in better shape than what you are on the side of the road saying, hey, I'm done. I can't do this.
I just knew that mentally I was tough. And I trained my mind as much as I trained my body this year. And I knew that if I could just fight through the dark moment, that a positive would come. I would have the light moments again. I would get back to myself and start smiling again. So for me, it was, I just had to remain strong mentally because I knew my body was there. I just had to get the brain to focus.
Wow. So after the first loop, you get to the second loop. What was the second loop like for you?
Fortunately, it was a little bit drier. The roads weren't quite so wet. I know that the second loop is often harder, but I tell you, coming through LaGrange where you got the cheering section, it's really fast through there. So it gave a nice little boost to get through that second loop. My average speed came up tremendously on that second loop.
Really?
I went from somehow averaging 14.5 miles an hour to my last split was 16.8.
Nice.
So I really found myself through there and found that mental grit that I needed and got my legs together and said, you know what, we're going to finish it. We're going to get off this bike today. And now at that point, I knew I could. At that point, the rate of people passing me had slowed down and I actually started passing others. So that was huge too, to start to know that I was feeling good, even though I had a ways to go. I just took it in 5 mile blocks. I said, all right, 5 miles at a time. We're going to just tick them off.
Wow. So the later portion of the bike ride, miles 80, 90, and 100. These are the miles where a lot of people really struggle mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you dealing with these miles? Because it had started raining again by this point.
Yes, it had started raining again, but being fortunate enough to know the course, I knew that was the fun part of the course. That was the rolling hills. Those are the fun hills that you don't have to fight so hard to get up, but you pick up a lot of speed going down. And there's a section where they just roll one right after another. And I never had to fight them. I worked up the hill. I flew down the hill, got up the second one. I started enjoying my race. I also realized too that I was climbing up the hills faster than others and I was getting down them faster than others. And that's where I started to really make a gain on my overall bike speed was through there. I started having fun. I made a point to remember some of the little inside jokes from the girls that I rode with 6 weeks before. I came past a few places where we had a really funny moment and I giggled thinking about it because it got me in a good headspace. So it kept me going. It really kept me going. And, I just started feeling better. I can't even describe to you how great I felt the last 40, 45, 50 miles of the bike course.
That's awesome for you to be a first timer to experience the worst part of the bike ride up front and then to be able to enjoy this. And you literally put fun and heels in the same sentence, just so you know. I know how you did that.
I never thought I would do that. Never. That's crazy. But I enjoyed it. I never had that moment. You know, I remember riding the course 6 weeks before about mile 88. I was like, you know what? I am so sick of riding my bike. I am so tired of riding. This saddle hurts. My shoulder hurts. Everything hurts. I'm done. I'm never going to make it on race day. But I remember getting past that point on Sunday and I was like, you know, at this point, a few weeks before I was done and right now I feel great. So when I got to 90, I knew it would start to flatten out a little bit. The hills weren't so bad. You know, we're starting to make that big descent back into town. I just had fun. I loved it. My legs felt good. I didn't feel overly tired. So I just picked up the speed and held on to it.
Wow. So you mentioned something that I actually want to dive into a little bit more here. And Then I just forgot my train of thought. Yes, that happens. Oh, gosh.
Yes, it happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Squirrel. All right. As far as the bike ride goes, is there anything that you would tell someone to be aware of that hasn't done this bike course before? Hey, everybody. I just want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. And I just want to let you know that I've enjoyed having so many people on this show, and I couldn't really do it without your support. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and being a part of what I'm doing. If you would, take a few moments to leave me a review over on iTunes. It would help me out tremendously, and enjoy the show. Oh, gosh.
Yes, it happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Squirrel. All right. As far as the bike ride goes, is there anything that you would tell someone to be aware of that hasn't done this bike course before?
Yeah, there are some things on the course. There's some really tight places on the course that you need to be aware of. There are some small hills that when you look at them, they don't look like much. But you definitely need to drop some gear there because they don't look like a whole lot, but they were steeper than you could imagine. They just didn't look like much, but they were pretty steep little hills. It would really suck to get stuck in a pack of those and not be able to drop your gear and drop a chain, or you can't pedal up and then you take a bunch of people out. There were some tight little climbs there that could have definitely been dangerous, especially because the roads were wet. So,
wow.
But that was the biggest thing on the course for me, were some of those hills, like in the lollipop, where towards the top of it, where it got kind of tight.
Okay. So you mentioned some inside jokes that you and your girlfriends had. Are those appropriate to talk about?
My favorite one. So I will tell this one because it's probably not funny to anybody else, but I was riding through, my friend Dale, she races for SOAS. She's a veterinarian. So we're all about animals and loving on animals and little different critters and all these things. So we were riding, and it was late in the ride, probably somewhere between 80 and 90 when we rode the course the first time. And I come past her, we kind of leapfrogged all day and took turns pulling just to get used to the course. And I had come around her, and she looks at me and she goes, "Oh my God, I just saw the biggest praying mantis I've ever seen." And she was so excited. I wish you could hear the excitement in her voice when she saw this praying mantis. Now, this sucker was huge, so I get it. So it just made for the best joke. And I remember coming past that spot where she saw that praying mantis, and I giggled about the praying mantis and just other really silly things that happened throughout the day. Like where, when we came past the stop sign where I had my blood sugar issue, I kind of giggled because we made some pretty big jokes out of that day. My friend Jess was our SAG support for that day, and she was like, "Oh, just call me if you have trouble. I'll answer the phone." So as I'm standing there in my diabetic moment, we called Jess 5 times and she never answered. So we gave her so much shit for not answering the phone. So we were like, "What the fuck? You suck." It turned into these. So they were really, that may seem very insignificant to others, they were funny to us. And so I made a point to remember those moments throughout the day. One of the girls was like, "Oh, look, I think that's a donkey." And Dale's like, "No, that's a pony." I mean, it was just really, really random things. And I tried to commit those things to memory because I knew that once I got out on that course on race day, that when I got into those tough moments, those dark moments, that those little things would help pull me out of them. And they definitely worked.
That's awesome. So whenever you start getting to miles 105, 110, you're getting ready to get off the bike in just a few miles here in less than 20 minutes. Are you doing anything to prepare to start running?
Well, no, not particularly. I wasn't grinding out in hard gear on that flat space. I was moving pretty quickly. I'd hit 19 miles an hour and just held on to it, but I had a pretty high cadence through there. So I wasn't super concerned about it. I knew when I got close, I did drop down a little bit and try to spin for a minute. I did some practices throughout the training cycle to see if spinning for a mile or two before would help prepare me for the run. Didn't really notice a huge difference, so I just kind of went with what felt good.
Okay. So you get to T2, or better yet, you get to the dismount line. What was this like?
I got to the dismount line, was running my bike that really long way to transition. And I saw my mom, and that her biggest thing is the bike. She is terrified. It's that mom fear that something's going to happen out there. And I looked at her and I said, I promised you I would get off this bike. And I told her, I said, I kept my promise. I told you I was on my way in. And so that was a big moment for both of us. Cause she was terrified. And with the rain, adding to that extra layer of, what's the word? I don't know what word I'm really looking for, but add to the sketchiness of the day, I guess you could say. She was terrified, but when I saw her, I told her, I'm like, I promised you I'd make it.
What was that like for y'all?
It was a big moment. It was emotional. Like I think she cried when I got off the bike. I don't blame her. I was really happy to be off the bike, but I never got to that point of take my bike. I don't want to see it again.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So whenever you hand your bike off, you still have to run all the way down, even further.
Yep.
To go down there to get your bag, then run even further to get into the nice sandy pit of hell in there.
The sand pit. Yeah.
Yes. So what was all this like for you?
I grabbed my run bag, and at this point I knew I was going to be an Ironman, and cause the run is my thing. I'm a runner. So I knew I could get through 26.2 miles, and I got into the change tent. Now this is the weirdest thing. So I get into the change tent and I go to it. I find a spot, which I actually think was the exact spot I found in T1. Would you believe that 3 volunteers looked directly at me, turned their head and went another direction? So I had no help in T2. None.
Really?
I had no help. I had to do it all on my own. Now I did have a lady sitting next to me that had a volunteer helping her. And the volunteer helping her actually helped me get my sports bra on, because wrangling a sports bra when you're wet is like wrangling an octopus. It is a disaster. So fortunately, she did help me in between. So the volunteer helping this lady next to me helped me as well when I needed the big things like straighten out the strap on my sports bra or whatever. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of help. So my T2 took me a little bit longer. Probably the funniest thing that happened, and this is going to be totally gross to some people, and I don't care. I just thought it was hilarious. Everyone who's done Ironman will totally get it. I come out of the change tent ready to run, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stop and use the porta potty in T2, because I'd rather my T2 be 2 minutes longer than totally ruin my overall pace on the run.
Right.
So it's drizzling just a little bit at this point, and there's a guy, a volunteer, standing at the porta potties with this roll of toilet paper.
That was me.
That was you?
Yes.
So that's you? So you're like, you don't want toilet paper? I'm like, no, man. It's Ironman. Nobody needs toilet paper right now. And so I'm like thinking, I think I just disgusted this guy, because I didn't give a flying fuck about any toilet paper at this time. Okay, so this makes the story that much funnier. Oh my God. So I'm like, this guy is trying so hard to give me toilet paper right now. And I'm like, it's wet out here, and all that's going to do is cause a lump of fucking toilet paper, and nobody needs that right now. I'm like, I didn't want to say this at the time, but I'm like, I've already peed on my bike 4 times. You really think I need toilet paper? So this is fantastic. That's hilarious. So yeah, I mean, that was just one of the funniest moments of the day. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't need any fucking toilet paper. Are you kidding me?
So I actually got 27 volunteer bands for handing out toilet paper there.
Did you really?
Yes.
I just didn't care at that point.
Things that didn't matter.
No, they didn't matter. Toilet paper was not on my list at that time. So I love the fact that was you. Yes, that's awesome.
Wow.
It's awesome that I remember that and be like, no, fucker, I don't need toilet paper. Like, it's been a long day already. You think that's going to change my day?
No. So you get out of the porta potty and you head out on the run. There's some stairs here on the run before you even get to the run course.
Yeah. What the hell was that about?
Why would they do that?
I don't know, but I wasn't a fan.
Yeah. I don't think anybody was, honestly. So you get out on the run course. How does the first 2 miles of the run go for you?
Well, I ran them a little too quickly. I tried really hard to rein it in. I knew it was going to be a long night, so I knew I needed to slow down, but you know, typically coming off the bike, your legs just feel like jello. You have that those tired bike legs. I didn't have that feeling. My legs felt good. They were ready to run. Maybe that's because I spent 14 minutes in transition. I don't really know, but they felt good. So I was really happy with that. And I got out on the run. My run didn't really start falling apart till over halfway.
Wow.
So, but I did hug my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle and everybody when I was coming out to get onto the run course, which was great. Good.
So what was this like whenever you actually realized that, hey, you're on the run and this is going to actually happen?
It was just great. I smiled the whole time. I don't think I ever quit smiling. I hugged all of my teammates, the base teammates, the SOAS teammates, some of the people that were from the local tri club where I live. I hugged all of them. I got more hugs on that run course than I probably have my whole life. It was just great. I loved every minute of it. There were a couple of bad miles for me where I walked most of them because I had a cramp in my hamstring, but getting to see the teammates that I have trained and talked to since last year, my SOAS girls, made the day. I hugged them. There were 3 of us in our little circle of 6 were first time Ironman athletes. So I hugged those girls I was headed in. They hadn't got to the turnaround yet to head in. So I got to see them. I hugged them and I said, the next time I see you, you're going to be an Ironman. And I said that to Dale and to Heather, and they both said the same thing back. One thing one of the girls kept saying, she's like, I just couldn't get over how great you looked. She said, you just looked happy, like you were in your element. She said, I know you were working hard because I saw your run split. She said, but you looked fantastic. I just enjoyed the day more than I can even tell you.
Wow. So as far as the run goes, you get to actually go by Churchill Downs. It's a straight out and back 2 loops.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like going by Churchill Downs the first time? Because this was before it really got dark, right?
To be honest with you, I don't remember going by Churchill Downs because I think I was so discombobulated just taking in the fact that I was on the run of my first Ironman. And at that point I had saw some of the girls. So we chatted and ran, and, you try to talk to people along the way. So I don't actually remember going by there, to be honest with you.
Okay. So from a nutrition standpoint, did you have any blood sugar issues throughout the bike or the run?
When I was feeling really good, I felt really good on the run. So I kind of messed up myself and didn't take in what I needed to take in the first part of the run. So about mile 12, I felt the blood sugar drop. Really? And I got a goo out of my run belt and said, you know what, we're going to take in this goo. We're going to get to the next aid station, grab some Coke. And I got the goo in. I walked for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I was doing a 5-1 run walk, which was very effective. So I walked a couple extra minutes until I knew that goo was in and I could keep running. So once that settled down, I kept running, got to the next aid station. My stomach was growling at this point. So I got 2 pretzels, only 2, because I wanted to see what would happen. I didn't want to eat a whole bunch of them and then them come back up or, just cause stomach pain. But they actually settled that really hungry feeling. So once I got through that moment, I knew that I needed to pay more attention to the nutrition aspect of the rest of the run. So I made sure at every aid station to get some sort of carbohydrates and calories and fluids down, and it helped a lot.
Okay, so did you have any cramping or GI issues other than that?
No, I got heartburn one time, and I think it was from all the Coca-Cola I had started drinking. So one lesson I learned was to always keep Pepto-Bismol tablets in your race belt.
Hopefully in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah. They're individually wrapped. So when that heartburn set in, I took a couple of those, and that settled that down right away. My left hamstring cramped at mile 14. So I just knew at that point that I would run until it would cramp, and I would walk until that cramp would release. Sometimes I could pull off the 5-1 before that cramp started. And sometimes I would have to run a little bit shorter and walk a little bit more. Right. It was just the nature of the day. So I just did what I could. I really just had to go with what I could do.
So on the first loop, you get to the end of the first loop and it says to the finish or to the second loop?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
I knew that was coming. The energy, though, from the finish line, you could hear it probably about a half a mile out. So it was exciting. and I knew that when I made that turn that I only had about 2.5 hours left and I would get there. So I knew my moment was coming. I knew I just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I made the turn. The energy was pretty exciting. It was exciting. People are cheering for you, even though you have a lap to go. And they knew that, like they knew you were coming in for lap 2, and they're still cheering you on. So the crowd support towards that end was really crucial. They're like, you just got one more lap and you'll be an Ironman at the end of the day. And it was a great experience. I don't generally care for loop courses, but that one was great. Just the energy there was nice to have. So I made the turn, never stopped at special needs, and just went back out and enjoyed the rest of my run.
Wow. So miles 18, 19, and 20, where most people have some dark moments there. How were you?
I did have some not great moments. They weren't dark because I knew I could walk the last 8 miles and still make it. So I had to walk, I think somewhere around 18, I walked somewhere around there. And then I got my legs back. So I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around 19 to 20. I got my legs back through about mile 23. So I had a good solid 5K where I was able to pick my pace back up and maintain my 5-to-1 run walk. I remember coming somewhere around mile 20. In mile 22, I had come back to the base tent, because we got to see them multiple times throughout the day. And Danny had gotten his phone out to do a Facebook Live video to our team page. And he was like, Amy's coming in for her last lap. And I'm like, yeah, I've got 4 miles to go. And I said, 4 miles and I'll be an Ironman for the first time. And so it kind of all started to sink in when I made the turn. And I got that energy back. Mile 23 was pretty brutal. I think I walked all of mile 24.
Wow.
And then I hit mile 25.
So what was mile 25 like?
When my watch clicked to 25, that I had finished 25, I ran all of 26 almost. I think I walked 1 minute of the last mile.
Wow. So whenever you get to the sign in the road that says to the finish or the second loop, and you actually get to go to the finish line, what was this like for you emotionally?
I started smiling, like the biggest grin ever. I started high-fiving people because they wanted high fives. And I'm like, just take it all in. Take in the moment. Enjoy it. It's gorgeous. So that was before the couple hundred yards before the carpet. So I was just trying to take it in and realize that I was going to be an Ironman when I'm about to cross this finish line. And I still feel good. Like I don't feel like crap. I wasn't ready to quit. I could have kept going if I needed to. And I hit the carpet. I had a girl in front of me and I was like, I need my moment in the finish line because, well, everybody wants that. So this girl stopped and like right in front of me. So I was able to go around her and I had my moment in the finish line. I don't really remember anything from the carpet other than that. I got through the finish line and I'm sitting here thinking, holy shit, I just did that. Like I just finished that. And then the girl puts the medal around my neck. And one of my SOAS teammates was volunteering as a finish line catcher. So she made sure that she came to be my volunteer. And I stood there a second and I went, oh my God, Sweet Home Alabama's playing. I'm like, how appropriate. So in my finish line video, you can hear Sweet Home Alabama playing, which I thought was super appropriate being the girl from Alabama.
That's awesome.
It was really cool. I wish I had heard it on the carpet, but there's so many horns and whistles and people clapping and they have cowbells. You don't hear a whole lot.
Right. It's really loud.
It's very loud.
So what was this like actually finishing emotionally for you?
I just stood there in disbelief. I thought I would cry at the finish line, but I'm not really one of those girls that cries a lot. I feel like one of those cold-hearted bitches that, doesn't cry even at funerals. It's true. But I stood there and I stood there and just took it all in. Like, I can't believe that I just did that. Then I'm like, okay, I really want to take my shoes off. I was really ready to not wear socks anymore. But I'm still in disbelief. It's been a week and it's still not very real.
So whenever you met up with your mom and dad and your family, what were they saying to you? Do you remember what they were saying?
I don't. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what they were saying.
Did you go to the athlete food tent afterwards and get some food?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I was kind of overwhelmed there. Like my family they were all trying to talk to me, and I'm like, I don't even know what's happening right now. You know, because your mind's just really foggy. And they were all telling me, like, I can't believe how great you look. Like, you just look like you feel so good. And I said, I really do. You know, nothing really hurts. I feel fantastic. So we were walking back to the hotel. One thing I'd asked my family for in advance was when I came through the finish line, just for some space. I'm not really great at talking after races, and this one was the same. So they did that. So my dad walked next to me. We walked about a block in front of everybody, and I went, oh my God, I forgot to go get my morning clothes bag. So Dad's like, well, I can go get it for him. Like, they probably won't give it to you. I was like, we can just go back there and get it. He was like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Let's go. And I can't believe I walked like 4 blocks back to get it, because I was almost at the hotel when I realized I had forgotten it.
Wow.
So we walked back, and I felt great. Now, when I got back to the hotel, I was really ready just to sit down. But all in all, I felt really good.
Wow. So looking back on it, how well prepared for this race do you think you were?
I was prepared. I told Dave, like during taper even, I said, you know, this is the most prepared I've ever been for a race ever. It's the most prepared I have felt for a race, you know, mentally, physically. I told him, I said, I think we did it right. I said, for the first time in my racing career, I'm not questioning, have I done enough training? Because I've done the work. The work's done, and I got through some of the hardest training of my life. It was harder than race day. And all in all, I think it really worked. So I was very mentally and physically prepared for the race.
Wow. So after all this fun stuff with the finish and you get back to the hotel, how was your recovery process?
Obviously I didn't really sleep that well after the race initially. I was really tired, but very antsy. So I got up early the next morning. I was really sore. I had really weird pains that I'd never had before, like pain in my left shin. And that was very strange. It wasn't shin splints, because I've had those. It was all really weird. So I was very slow moving, but the soreness, and it actually kind of felt like you had the flu, you know, that whole body ache. So I remember, my uncle like had put his arm down on my shoulder at breakfast the next morning, and I cringed. It was all I could do to not cry, because it hurt. Like, you know, just to touch you felt like you had a bruise or something. And it took a few days to get over that. I think by Thursday I didn't have any more soreness.
Wow. What about your appetite? Did it come around instantly, or did?
Oh yeah, I was surprisingly, I was ready to eat after the race. So my mom, the one thing I don't eat pasta normally, but the one thing I had been thinking about for hours was macaroni and cheese. And so she wins, because she went and found me some. I'm like, that's all I want right now is mac and cheese. And she brought it. She went and got it and brought it to my room. And I sat there in my tri-kit, wrapped in a towel at the chair, and ate before I even decided to shower. But I ate like 4 full meals on Monday.
God.
I was so hungry. I couldn't stop eating. It didn't actually settle down until about Thursday.
Wow. So for first timers that are going to be doing this race next year, what's some advice that you would give them?
My advice for any first timer for any race is to go out and enjoy the day. Make the best of it. Even in situations you can't control. Don't stress the things that you have no control over. And I think that's crucial, to not stress things that you don't have any control over.
Right. So looking back on it, how could Ironman have made your experience better?
The only thing I would have asked for was the volunteer in T2. That would have helped me a little bit, but other than that, I don't even really know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every moment, even the dark ones. I just enjoyed the day. I have no complaints.
Good. So we covered a lot about your race. Do you have anything else you want to add, or anything we left out?
I can't really think of anything.
Okay. So we'll just transition a little bit to wrap everything up here. What's next for you?
Well, I was trying hard not to think about next year, but I think, just because, but you know, we're triathletes. We're very type A. We like to plan. We like to prepare. And I was afraid I was going to be that person that never wanted to do Ironman again, but, unfortunately that's not the case. So I can't wait for another one. I'm thinking Chattanooga next year. I think that'll be my next full Ironman. And I have a couple of 70.3s I want to do, but I'm not totally sure which direction I want to go with them. I'm torn between Chattanooga and Gulf Coast. So I'll do one of those in the spring for sure.
Wouldn't it just make sense to do Chattanooga?
It would, but I'm going to be in Chattanooga for the full. So why not go to Gulf Coast and race a different venue?
Yeah, but that's like a race recon if you get to go to Chattanooga. So you kind of get an idea of the town, the layout.
It definitely is. But for me, I like to experience new race venues. And I know I live close enough to Chattanooga that I can go ride and train on the course when I need to. I mean, it's a 2-hour drive for me if I wanted to go ride there.
That's not too bad.
No, not at all.
So what races are on your bucket list?
I would like to go do Challenge Roth in Germany. They say that's an amazing race. So I'd like to do that one. And I'm hoping to go to Ireland and race that race if it continues.
Well, you know, Brett's going to Ireland, right?
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys on the base team. They're like, come on, go to Ireland. It's still open. I'm like, I don't have the money for that right now. I wish I could.
How do y'all afford that shit? Man.
Like, I can't, airfare, shipping my bike, all that crap. I'm like, it just wouldn't do.
Yeah.
The timing's just not right for next year to go to Ireland.
Wow. So how can athletes follow you?
Athletes can follow me on Instagram. I think my Instagram handle is Amy E. Coley. So you can follow me there. Facebook too.
Okay. Well, to wrap up the episode, I only have one more question, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
The definition of a perfect race, I think my Ironman was my most perfect race. Just for me, the perfect race is enjoying it, being happy with your finish, being happy with your training. Even if it didn't go initially as planned, just being truly okay with how the day went is a perfect race.
Wow. Well, that's awesome, Amy. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to following you in the future at gosh, I'm trying to say Chattanooga, but I have challenge written right under it. So I hope you have a good day at Chattanooga and hopefully Challenge Roth one day.
Hopefully so. I appreciate the time today. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Have a good day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks. Sounds great.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.